Okay, baby, let's go over and talk about this series. Now, last night in the video recapping the end of the Panthers-Bruins series, we talked about how the Panthers ended up winning Game 7. They dethroned the Kings, or not the Kings, but the Bruins. Yeah, we're not talking about LA here. The best team the NHL has ever seen in the regular season had just gotten defeated by Florida, and now you have yourselves a second-round matchup that I think a lot of people are going to be super intrigued to see. Two American superstars, Mateychuk and Austin Matthews. Oh boy, that's going to be really tough to get the hang of saying Matthew versus Matthews. That's kind of funny. But two American superstars, two Russian goaltenders, two two-way captains, and a bunch of star power in between. This is going to be a fun series, and it's one that I'm honestly a lot more excited to watch than if it had been Toronto versus Boston. Now, we know the Bruins have had the Maple Leafs number over the past few years, the Game 7 in 2013, the Game 7s back-to-back in the Matthews era, but when it comes to Florida versus Toronto, this has never been a matchup we have seen in the playoffs before. They've never met, and it's kind of poetic how this series comes together in the way that it has. On the one side, you've got Toronto that hasn't broken out of the first-round slump in 20 years. And on the other hand, you have a Florida team that just pulled off pretty much the biggest upset in NHL playoff history. And I'm going to say that over the 2019 Tampa Bay Lightning Columbus series. I'm going to say that over all the other Game 7s, Game 4s that we had seen throughout the years. You cannot write this. You cannot write that the Florida Panthers, President's Trophy winning team from last year, only to fall in their reign in 22-23, defeat the best team the NHL has ever seen in the regular season in a 7-game series with Carter Verhaeghe getting the Game 7 overtime dagger. That's tough. And realistically, the Florida Panthers have shown off in this series alone, the Boston series that is, why they were that President's Trophy winning team last year. Now, we know what happened last season. They ended up choking in the second round to the Tampa Bay Lightning. It was a pretty bad showcase for that Panthers team. But all in all, just watching the games against Boston, watching how this team got hot, it would be pretty foolish to label this team as just the Atlantic Division wildcard, because realistically, this is a team that has its bite, and they've got some pretty good star power behind them. So when it comes to the Toronto versus Florida series, I honestly don't know where things are going to go. If I had to go with my gut instinct, I'm saying probably Toronto in 6 or 7, mostly because I do feel like the Maple Leafs are a better team, and I do think that with the additions they made at the deadline, plus the momentum they're carrying from finally getting out of the first round, this is a team poised to win. Although for the Cats, I mean, they did eliminate the team that I had winning the East in the first place, so I guess there's that to show for it, right? But if you go over to the season series between these two teams, take a look at this. The Florida Panthers ended up going 1-1-2 against the Maple Leafs in this season's worth of play. The first game was January 17th, 2023. Toronto ended up winning this one in extra time. Overtime winner scored by William Nylander. Then you have yourselves Game 2 between these two teams. Toronto takes a 6-2 storming victory on March 23rd. 6 days later, the Panthers played the Leafs again. They won 3-2, and then you had yourselves the final game between these two teams about a month ago. Florida loses 2-1 in regulation to the Maple Leafs, and it kind of serves as the primer heading into this second-round series. The Maple Leafs do have a 3-1 record against Florida this season, so they actually do have the odds if you go by season statistics, but then again, dude, the Florida Panthers, at any point in this regular season, they didn't feel the same like the Florida Panthers did when they played against Boston. This team was just at another gear. Paul Maurice was able to say, all right, well, just go back to how you played last year, be good again, and we'll make things work. Because even though we don't have Uyghur and Huberdeau, we've got Mateychuk, and we've got everybody else in our blue line that is actually pretty good too. Pretty good team over there, not gonna lie. Sergei Bobrovsky, of course, is the President's Trophy killer. We talked about how he was part of the Columbus team that eliminated the Lightning in 4 games in 2019. Now he gets the dagger against Boston in that 7-game series. So Sergei Bobrovsky knows what it's like to take down Kings, and he's got himself a pretty big task ahead of him in the second round as Toronto is looking to not hold back and to continue this run. Let's go over to the scorers of each of these two teams in the playoffs so far. If you go over to the Toronto Maple Leafs, they got themselves a pretty good stat line from all of the guys at the core of their lineup. You really want to see these players in particular suiting up and getting the points. And so with Marner, Matthews, Riley, Tavares, and Nylander leading the team in points, it's no real surprise. Now you have Ryan O'Reilly right there too. Matthew Nyes is the next guy after that. It's kind of interesting how you have the points distributed like this: 11 for Marner, 9 for Matthews, 8 for Riley, 7 for Tavares, Nylander, and O'Reilly, and then it's 3. But it just kind of goes to show that the top guys getting it done, yeah, this is what you needed to see. Mitch Marner has had such a terrible reputation amongst fans that are not Leafs fans over the past few years for not showing up in the playoffs, that now seeing him get almost 2 points a game in round 1 against the Tampa Bay Lightning, it feels pretty cathartic, I'm not gonna lie. You then go over to the Florida Panthers and you notice that this team actually had a lot more of a spread out goal scoring spread, and not 1 or 2 guys really dominated in the way that the top guys for Toronto dominated instead. Where the Maple Leafs had only 6 players who had scored over 3 points in their series, the Florida Panthers had, 9? So quite a few more guys out there. Reinhart, of course, had himself a pretty good Game 7. Same could be said about Carter Verhaeghe, Mr. Overtime himself. But Mateychuk had 11 points in 7 games. Montour on the blue line, very good player. 8 points right there, too. Same could be said about Verhaeghe. Barkov had 6 points. Reinhart and Bennett each with 5. Add to that Ito Luosterainen. Anton Lundell has been impressing me a lot throughout the past few years. He had 4 points, same with Nick Cousins. So this is a pretty deep and spread out team when it comes to their talent. It's just going to be interesting to see how Toronto balances that out with the bulk of their production coming from the top of their lineup. Plus all the extra depth on Toronto that makes them a lot more difficult to play against too. Noel Ashari is a good name. Of course we've got McCabe in there, Luke Shen. Not to mention you could say Matt Nyes is in that conversation too. I'm mostly looking forward to seeing how Austin Matthews and Mateychuk react to playing off against each other, how Mateychuk reacts to the Luke Shen-like bodies that are going to be shoving him around the crease and making his life difficult in front of the net. You have, of course, the goaltending matchup, Ilya Samsonov versus Sergei Bobrovsky. 2 Russian goaltenders who pretty much stole the series for their teams, and obviously, they're not guys that you would expect to being at the top of the list when it comes to best goalies in the NHL right now. But take a look at what they just did. They beat out Andrei Vasilevsky, whose reputation precedes himself as one of the best goaltenders we've had in this decade, and Linus Ullmark also got beat too. That guy admittedly was most likely hurt towards the end of that series, but Sergei Bobrovsky still comes out with the dub. So at the end of the day, this is a pretty good matchup. I can't wait to see what happens in Game 1. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Matthews versus Tkachuk, about the other players getting involved in here. Lundell, Kerfoot, Marner, Barkov, Carter Verhaeghe's been on a heater as of late too. Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.